Nice sunny day here in Ireland. It's morning in Ireland. It's 11 a.m., but we're very nice sunshine, so we're all happy.
Okay, fine.
But in Ireland, it's about 25 degrees. So in Ireland, that's a heat wave, 25 degrees.
Okay.
I think in India, it's about 35 or 34.
No, it is less because from past few days, it is raining in Chennai.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Presently also it's raining.
Oh, really? Oh, interesting. Because here, the sun is coming, everyone's happy. Oh.
You start, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Very good afternoon to all. It is with great pleasure to welcome you all here for 16-day International Online Faculty Development Program on Teaching, Learning and Assessing in 2030, organized by Department of Physics, SRMI, Sri Ramapuram campus. I am honored once again to introduce our today's guest, Mr. Michael Murphy, Academic Director, Adult Continuing Education, Cork University Business School, University College Cork, Ireland. Today he is going to speak on the flipped classroom utilization technology for more effective learning and assessment. Highlight of his profile are: Michael Murphy is a lecturer in marketing in University College Cork. He has also guest lectured in number of overseas universities in India, China, Singapore, and UK, and worked for a year as a visiting lecturer in Loyola College, Chennai, India. Prior to joining UCC as a lecturer, Michael held position in the field of marketing, business development, and market research, working in Canada, US, and Ireland. He contributes to a range of programs, including the BCom at undergraduate level and MBA at postgraduate level. He has been a director of the MSc Management and Marketing, the largest business master program in UCC, for the last 5 years, and prior to this has directed and developed a number of other postgraduate academic programs. He chaired the Internationalization Committee for the College of Business and Law from 2014 to 2018 and continue to involve in international activity and teaching. He is also a member of UCC Marketing Strategy Group and the UCC Academic Strategy Working Group. Recently took a role of Industry Liaison Director for Adult Continuing Education Program run with Department of Management and Marketing. With this short introduction, I would like to invite our guests to take hold the session.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Dr. Rani.
Thank you.
And I'm delighted to be here again today. So some of you may have joined me for the session last week when we were looking at feedback. And I had promised I'd come back again this week and look at another element of teaching, which I think is really important and I think really ties in with the theme, which is teaching, learning and assessing in 2030. So as Dr. Rani said, my presentation is going to be about the flipped classroom and about utilizing technology. So I want to start by explaining what we mean by the flipped classroom and how we can use technology to try and enhance learning. And then also I'll talk later about using technology for assessment. And a number of you who were on the program last week also asked me to talk a little bit more about maybe assessment and group assessment and using things like the Belbin framework. So if I have time for that also, I'll address that. So again, just for those of you who are joining today, maybe who didn't see me last week, as Dr. Rani said, I've quite an involvement with India and also a number of other countries in Asia, and like Singapore, Malaysia, Sri Lanka. And as she said, I also worked in the US for anybody maybe joining us from that side of the world. So I worked in business before, but I have been primarily an academic, and I've got really interested in the whole area of teaching. So my subject discipline is marketing and business ethics, but because of the large classes that I deal with, I've found myself getting more interested in teaching and more effective teaching, and particularly the use of technology. So this idea for the flipped classroom, it's been around for many, many years, and I was aware of it, and it was something I was thinking about maybe I should try doing. But it was, as with a lot of things, because of COVID, we were, in a sense, forced into adopting technology. I found myself in a situation with 700 students. We had a full lockdown in Ireland. I couldn't even go onto the campus for nearly 2 years. So everything had to be done from my home and using technology. We were very lucky in that we had just adopted the Canvas platform about 2 or 3 years before lockdown. So we had very good functionality. So I may make some references to Canvas, but it doesn't really matter what platform you're using for what I'm going to talk about now, the flipped classroom. So the idea of the flipped classroom, like I said, it's been around a long time, but the idea here really is just giving a standard lecture the best use of class time. So some weeks I find myself maybe, if I'm lecturing in market research and I do a lecture on how to develop effective surveys, and I find myself maybe 2 or even 3 times a week effectively giving the same lecture to different cohorts. And for many years I've been thinking, we do 2-hour lecture slots, so that's why I'm finding 45 minutes is going to be very tight. But we do 2-hour lecture slots, and so 2 hours 2 or 3 times a week I'm doing the same lecture, and I'm just thinking there must be a more effective way of doing this, not just for my time and efficiency, but for the benefit of the students. So when Canvas came around, I had to record all my lectures. So they were live, but they were also recorded for the benefit of students who maybe didn't have a good connection. So I found myself, with effectively all my lecture material recorded. And I had this idea of the flipped classroom. So the following year, when we came back to campus with one of my modules, and I'll talk later about the feedback on that, I did some research on that, but with one of my modules, I decided I would use the recorded material for that module from the previous year, the Canvas era, and utilize this so-called flipped classroom. So the students would watch the lecture online, and then when they came to class on campus, we would have discussion, interaction, case study, group activity, critical analysis of the lecture. And I must say, I found this much more stimulating for myself, certainly, and it seemed the students did as well. But it's not that, like everything, it's not that easy. It takes preparation, and there are other things to consider. So I'm going to talk about that for the first part of the presentation today. So, so what is the flipped classroom? So I've taken some of this material from the Harvard University Bok Center for Teaching and Learning. So a flipped classroom is structured around the idea that lecture, sorry, I just need to take this out of the way. Yeah. So that lecture or direct instruction it's not the best use of class time, like I said. Instead, students encounter information before class, freeing class time for activities that involve higher order thinking and active learning. Excuse me. So again, like I was saying, if you're having, what we consider a standard lecture where the students come into the room, the lecturer presents them with material, maybe using PowerPoint, other notes, readings, and they're encountering this for the first time. This is like information dissemination. And the flipped classroom queries that and says, if the students already had this information before they came into the classroom, then we could do so much more in the classroom with that information and awareness that the students already have. So this then allows us for what we call higher order thinking and active learning. And I'll be using that phrase a couple of times. This idea of active learning. So the students now become a participant in the learning rather than just, if you like, passive recipients sitting, listening to a lecture, talking for the whole time, or maybe even asking the odd question or something like that. Sorry, so the flipped classrooms or flipping classrooms has been a practice within certain disciplines, even though, like I said, it maybe wasn't given that name. So the concept took off as technological changes made it easier to access and create educational materials. Like I was saying, particularly around what people are calling the COVID pivot, when people had to embrace technology. This approach assumes that there is no difference between a student listening to a lecture individually and with other students in class. Now, that's not necessarily true. And this is something I discovered myself when I was asking students and doing some feedback about doing my lectures online, and when I was giving pre-recorded lectures to students and asking them, is that the same as sitting in a lecture on campus? And many of them would say, no, you're missing something. So the first thing to say at the outset is, with the flipped classroom, it's not just saying that giving students a pre-recorded lecture online is the same as them sitting in a class listening to that lecture, even though it could be the same material, the same lecturer, delivered at the same pace. But sometimes just the fact you're in a room with other people experiencing that lecture can actually have an impact on the quality perceived of that lecture, and also things like the social cues, the body language maybe that you might get from the lecture that you wouldn't necessarily see just from a recording, or even just a video of, you know, a close-up of the lecturer, or maybe the way a lecturer moves around and puts emphasis on certain things, or the lecturer might read the student's body language and they might look puzzled about something, so he or she might repeat that point. Whereas when you're broadcasting online, you don't see that if you're just pre-recording and you're talking into a camera. So I'm not saying that the lecture experience pre-recorded and given online to students is necessarily the exact same as the lecture experience. But what we're trying to do is to try and make that lecture experience more interactive. And again, this idea of active learning. So that's what I'll be talking about for the next while. Interestingly, a number of studies have been done on this. So I just want to give you a little bit of theory first before I talk about my own experiences, just so you're aware that this has actually been researched in some detail, and there is significant support for this concept. So a 2014 meta-analysis of 225 research studies. So in other words, this was a meta-analysis of a lot of studies that have been done in this area. Now, this was only done in STEM classes, and they found that students with active learning performed 6% better in exams than students in classes with traditional lecturing, and that students in classes with traditional lecturing were 1.5 times more likely to fail than in classes with active learning. Now, when I talk about active learning, that's where the students are participating in the lecture. That's where there's group activity, there's small group discussion, there are breakout classes, there are interactive exercises using maybe online media and so on. And I can talk about some of those. But again, just to say, active learning does not necessarily mean the flipped classroom. So you can have active learning in a more traditional style lecture, which I'm sure many of you already have, and I do as well. You know, when you use things like Mentimeter or other, say, polling devices where students can take out their phones and answer a question, and then up on your PowerPoint, you know, their answer comes up in a pie chart or something. So there are many ways you can have active learning, but the flipped classroom takes it to another level, where so much of the initial information and data for the lecture is actually given to the students prior to the lecture. So it enables much more active learning then to take place in the class. And additionally, they found that active learning has been shown to decrease the achievement gap for underrepresented minorities and first-generation college students. So what are some of the benefits of the flipped classroom? It's flexible. So again, if you can do a lot of this work online, and I found in my own case, where I have large modules with a lot of elective students, it means that students maybe who have a tight timetable because they're taking other core modules, but they want to take mine as an elective. If I say to them, well, you know, half the lecture is going to be pre-recorded and you only have to come to class 1 day a week, or, you know, for 2 hours or 1 hour instead of 2 hours, or whatever the schedule might be, it means they can then do the preparation in their own time, fitting in their own timetable. And again, they can learn at their own pace. So they, you know, if they've been given the material in advance, they can look at that and prepare that in their own time, fitting it around their own schedule. It's also putting responsibility back to students to, you know, to manage their own learning. And I'll come to this in a while as a possible downside as well, because I did find some issues with this with my own module, that some students clearly just didn't do the preparation in advance or didn't do it adequately. The idea here again is that they learn rather than encounter material in the class. So in other words, if you come into a lecture and you're doing a new topic, say in my case, I lecture marketing. If I'm going to talk about market segmentation, and they come in, and I could do a very interesting lecture, but this could be the first time they've heard of the concept of market segmentation, certainly at a more developed level in terms of, you know, what we would do in the module. Whereas if they have done prior reading, if they have seen a lecture from me already online about market segmentation, and now they're coming in with significant understanding of that concept, we can then really explore that in class and critique it and discuss it and analyze it and give more examples and so on. And again, like I said, it makes it much more interesting for me as well as a lecturer, because I'm really thinking on my feet. Every lecture then is different because I don't know what the students are going to come back with. They might throw some questions at me that I didn't expect. So it can be challenging as well. You know, you really need to know your material. But I personally enjoy that very much. And like I said, this allows much more for opportunities for what we call higher level learning. In other words, critiquing, analyzing, discussing, rather than just, as I said earlier, being passive recipients of information. And it's a great use of time, because, you know, if every time I want to give a lecture on market segmentation, I spend an hour just going through the core concepts of market segmentation with some examples and so on, and then hopefully maybe allow an hour for more discussion. Now I have the full 2 hours in a 2-hour lecture to have that discussion. I can use more case studies, I can use more examples, I can have more discussion, I can have more class exercises, because they already had the information before they came into the lecture. The instructors work more closely with students. And again, because of this, you get to know your students better, because if you're doing breakout activities and you're walking around and you're asking each group what they came up with, and you're asking each group to nominate a spokesperson, you actually get to know your students a lot better than just standing in front of, if you like, the same audience, you know, week in, week out. So I think that's much better as well for that relationship. And it's great, and we'll talk about this in a moment, it's great for increased collaboration between students. So students now are getting to work with other students. And again, one of the things we have found, I don't know what it's like where you are, but one of the things we have found, particularly post-COVID, is that students are really welcoming activities that involve group activity, because they're saying it's actually allowing them to sort of re-socialize with their peers, which they kind of lost during COVID. Now, we would have had much more severe lockdowns than I think many of you possibly had. So students are now telling us that they really welcome things like group projects and group work in their modules. So again, I'm just going to give you some of the theory behind the flipped classroom, and then I'll talk about some of my own experiences, and then we'll talk about online assessment as well. So Bredo et al. 2021, and they've done quite an amount of research in this, and again, it's reflecting what I said there about student satisfaction. So they're saying that they found that students in flipped classrooms reported greater course satisfaction than those in lecture-based courses. The size of this overall effect was fairly small, so flipping the classroom is not a silver bullet for instantly boosting course evaluations. But in no context did flipping the classroom hurt course ratings. And in some settings, and this might be of interest in particular to many of you, including mathematics courses and courses taught in Asia and Europe, we observe more pronounced increases in student satisfaction. And I know, you know, as Dr. Rani said, I lectured in India for a year, and even though it was executive education, I was struck by the more traditional approach typically in India. And I know, talking with friends of mine and their children who were at university and college in India and in other Asian countries, I think you still have that much more formal approach where the teacher is the master and they come in and they lecture and the students take notes and then they're examined on the material. Whereas now I encourage students to challenge me. I come in and I say, you know, I've given you the accepted theory, but I really want someone to challenge this. Challenge me, you know, challenge what I'm telling you. Give me an example that you've come across that doesn't seem to fit in with what I've been telling you. And let's discuss that. And I think once you're open with students and you say to them, you know, I may not even have the answer, but I'll find it for you if I don't have it today, or maybe some other students have the answer. And students, I find, really respond well to that. They actually respect you more, I think, than trying to come in presuming that you're the master and you know everything and you know more than they do. So I often say to them, I see myself as a facilitator of learning rather than some kind of master or expert or anything like that. And you're just going to facilitate that learning that's within the group. And maybe it's latent within the students, but you're trying to bring that out. So although the flipped classroom pedagogies have been widely touted for their ability to foster 21st century learning objectives, previous syntheses of flipped learning have focused almost exclusively on outcomes related to academic achievement. So using data from 317 studies, our research addresses this deficit by providing a comprehensive meta-analysis of the effects of flipped versus lecture-based learning on academic, interpersonal, and satisfaction-related outcomes in higher education. And they concluded that overall, flipped classroom interventions produced positive gains in all of those particular areas. So again, I've mentioned some of those in terms of students finding it more satisfying, they're developing their intra and interpersonal skills, and also they're developing what we call soft skills, which is really valued, certainly in this side of the world, by employers. So if you have students who are now confident working in groups, speaking up in a group, chairing a group, facilitating a group discussion, these are the things that employers like to hear about as well. And Bredo also worked with somebody called Rolling, and they also explored some other benefits of flipped classrooms. And students in flipped classrooms perform better than those in traditionally taught classes across all academic outcomes we examined. And that would support the material I gave you from Harvard as well earlier. In addition to confirming that flipped learning has a positive impact on foundational knowledge, which again is, if you like, the core delivery of theory in most modules, and that's the most common outcome in prior reviews of the research, we found that flipped pedagogies had a modest positive effect on higher order thinking. Flipped learning was particularly effective at helping students learn professional and academic skills. So again, like I said, those kind of professional or soft skills that are so valued now by students and really help them in terms of trying to secure employment later. Importantly, we also found that flipped learning is superior to lecture-based learning for fostering all intrapersonal, intra and interpersonal outcomes examined, including enhancing students' interpersonal skills, improving their engagement with the content, and developing their metacognitive abilities like time management and learning strategies. So again, like I said, you're giving students more responsibility for their learning and how they manage their time and how they prepare in advance of the class, because they have this material that they need to prepare themselves. But like I said, that comes with challenges too. And I'll mention some of the ones I came across in my module. So just very quickly to finish off, we also found that more isn't always better. Compared to courses where all or nearly all class sessions follow the flipped model, i.e. fully flipped, courses that combined flipped and lecture-based approaches, partially flipped, tended to produce better academic outcomes. Now, this is something that has really interested me, because I'm thinking going forward, maybe the fully flipped model didn't work for those students who slipped through the cracks. In other words, the students who didn't manage their time well and didn't prepare well in advance. So I was actually heartened to hear about this idea that you could do kind of a partial flipped classroom. So maybe every second week, the lecture would be given in advance. And then on the alternative weeks, the lecture would actually be in class. So again, I'm playing around with this, and I'm thinking this year, I might do it every second week, because I found when I went fully flipped, there were definitely students who just were not engaging with the material. And I'll explain how I discovered this, in fact, later. So partially flipped courses also give instructors the flexibility to flip content that lends itself best to the model, while saving more complex or foundational topics for in-class instruction. And again, I like that idea that you can decide what's going to work better in class, and maybe where do I need to ensure that a student has covered this core material. I'm going to give it in a lecture. I'm not going to rely on them doing this themselves online. Whereas then there might be other material you think the class would work better. And I'll give you a small example. I mentioned there earlier, designing surveys. So traditionally, I would have found I do a lecture, it takes about 2 hours, how to design an effective survey for market research. And I talk about the order of questions and the use of language and Likert scales and semantic differentials and all the different elements that go into constructing a survey, designing, and then how you might implement it and actually administer it. And I'm fairly rushed to try and get that done in 2 hours. And then at the very end, I might put up 1 or 2 surveys and say, do you think that's a good survey or a weak survey? Do you want to critique it? And what I found now is if I do that 2-hour lecture online, I recorded that lecture during COVID, and then I gave the students that lecture. I said, you have to look at that lecture online in advance of the class next week on survey design and implementation and administration. And then for the whole 2 hours, I spent critiquing different surveys, discussing different ways to administer a survey, whether doing it by telephone or by email or by online pop-up or by in person, and so on and so on. And what are the advantages and disadvantages? And then I got students to think about examples, maybe where they answered a survey. I asked students to bring in surveys that they had maybe come across recently. And then I broke them into groups in the class, and I gave each group the same group of surveys. And I asked each group to critically evaluate about 6 or 7 different surveys, and then a spokesperson to nominate what they thought was their best survey and their weakest survey. And then we had a class discussion. And that was so much more rewarding, I think, for me, which isn't as important, but certainly for the students. And I noticed in module feedback at the end of the year, a number of students commented and said, that session on survey design, that was really interesting. It was actually fun as well. And they said it's one you'd really remember because it was so interactive, rather than the normal one where they just sat there for 2 hours with a 15-minute break. And I just put up PowerPoint after PowerPoint saying, this is how to design your question, and this is the best scale to use for eliciting this kind of information, and so on. So the benefits of flipped learning vary across geographic locations. So like I said earlier, it actually maybe has seemed to have more benefits in Asian and Middle Eastern countries. And I think, again, that's because what I was saying earlier, that possibly in those parts of the world, students are used to a more formal lecture style. So this allows them to engage in class discussion and critical thinking in a way that maybe they wouldn't have been used to or wouldn't have done before. And just the final point there, flipped learning was shown to be more effective than lecture-based learning across most disciplines. So again, this meta-analysis of hundreds of studies found that it was beneficial across almost all disciplines, but they found that it produced the greatest academic and those soft skills in language, technology, and health science courses. Now, again, I found it very beneficial in my area, which is marketing in business. And flipped learning can be a particularly good fit for these skills-based courses because class time can be spent practicing and mastering these skills. So again, you get the core knowledge previously, and then you use the class in maybe problem solving, case solving, and things like that to actually apply those skills. So I'll just talk a little bit about a module that I did. So I made reference there to, I'm just checking my time there. I made reference there to a module that I gave before COVID. I just did traditional lecture format. Then during COVID, it was all online. So then I had those recordings available to me when we went back on campus. And I decided for the first year back on campus, I would do a flipped classroom. So the students were given the lectures online. They then came into class and we did case studies, we did group activity, we did breakout sessions. And again, I thought it went very well with some issues, and I'll discuss those at the end. So I did a survey. I don't have a huge number of respondents. It was a master's class, so it wasn't a very big class. So there were 22 respondents, but that still was about 30% of the class, which, for an online survey is actually quite a good response rate. But just because it wasn't a very big class, there wasn't a huge number of respondents. But I think when you look at the answers, some very, very clear trends were emerging. So I won't go through all this in detail. I'll send it on to Dr. Rani and she can circulate it to participants. But certainly some of the things I asked them, like the hybrid delivery of the module worked well this year. So this was a Likert scale with pre-recorded lectures online and more discussion case studies in class. So between strongly and somewhat agree, 70, 80, so over 80% of the students liked that format. Going forward, it would be better if the lectures are delivered on campus only. So again, with a Likert scale, you should sort of mix positive and negative just to make sure that students are really reading the questions and not just ticking, going down the list and ticking agree or whatever. So I was trying to challenge it then and say, should we just go back to lectures? And you can see there then that there was quite a high, a third of the students were disagreeing with that. So that was more just testing to see, were students really looking at the questions more carefully. But at the same time, some of the students did quite, agree that maybe the traditional lecture format was good. But then when I asked this again in another way, going forward, the same delivery as this year should be maintained with pre-recorded lectures delivered on Canvas, which is what I did during COVID, and the scheduled class time made available for discussion, case studies, and guest presentations. And I know in my discipline, students really value guest presentations. They love to hear from industry speakers particularly. And my problem with that is if I have an industry speaker in for 1 hour, I'm losing 1 hour of class time. And then I'm thinking about the exam and I didn't cover that material and so on, even though the guest speaker could add so much value. So again, with this, I can put the lecture for the week online, and then I can use the class time for a guest speaker and then a discussion maybe afterwards about what the guest speaker has told us and how well that maybe fits in with the theory or doesn't. So again, very, very high figures there, 36 and 36%. So 70, 75, nearly, 3/4 of the class saying they would prefer this format. And only one student strongly disagreeing, 2 students disagreeing somewhat, and a couple of students uncertain. And then going forward, all students should be in the same room for a 2-hour session. So this was more to do with, I split the students, because there were about 65, 70 students in the class, I split them into groups of about 30, 35 for 1 hour each, because I wanted to see if a smaller group would be better for discussion rather than being in a group of 60. So they got 1 hour each on campus plus 2 hours of online material. And some students felt they would prefer to have the 2 hours on campus. In fact, if you look at it, it's kind of split actually, if you look overall. In fact, it's very, very split in terms of whether students liked just having 1 hour with a smaller group or 2 hours with a bigger group. But that's something I can revisit in the future. And then I just had some questions there on should there be more breakout sessions? And again, most students felt it's quite balanced if you look across in terms of the students who agreed and disagreed. And then keeping the pre-recorded lectures on Canvas. So Canvas is our learning platform, and a vast majority of students, if you look at it there, 96% of students are saying all the material should be left on Canvas, not just for the week prior to the lecture, but for the full semester. And that makes sense because it's a good learning aid. And particularly international students were saying it's great for them to feel the lecture is online so they can go back over it. Maybe if their English isn't so strong, they can go back, play it a second time, play it at a slower pace. And so again, like I said, keeping it, even if, I was asking this before we went back fully on campus. And again, very strong support for having those recordings. Okay, so what is the downside, in my experience, of the flipped classroom? And I'm just basing this now on the module that I did. Poor advanced engagement by some students, and I found particularly international students. And how do I know this? Because I was able to use Canvas Analytics. So I could go into Canvas, which again is our learning platform. I could see which students downloaded the material, how long did they spend, how long do they spend on the videos? So in Canvas, I have it in such a way they can't download the video from Canvas. They can only watch it in a platform we use called Panopto through Canvas. So I can see whether they're watching it or not, basically. So I could record exactly who watched which videos, how long they watched them for. And I'll have to be honest with you, I was quite shocked actually after 2 or 3 weeks. And I said it to the students, I said, look, I don't know if you're aware, but I said, I can analyze what you're doing. I'm not going to penalize you, but I'm just letting you know. And I said, I'm quite disappointed. Many of you are not watching the lectures. You're watching maybe 10 minutes. Many of you aren't even watching them at all. And I said, that explains why when you're coming to class, you're not participating in the discussion. How could you? Because you didn't get the core material. So this model only works if the students do the preparation in advance. So I would say to anyone, if you're thinking about this, you have to have mechanisms in place to ensure that the students understand this concept. It's made very clear to them, and that they do the material in advance. I found there was a reluctance then of some students, again, particularly some international students, maybe because they weren't comfortable with their English proficiency. By the way, the Indian students were fantastic. Some of my most participative students, I'm glad to say, are Indian students, but I found maybe with Chinese students who might find English more challenging, they tended to be very quiet in class. So I felt, again, a whole subsection of the group were missing out on this discussion. Now, they told me afterwards they were listening and they found it beneficial listening to what others were saying, but I would like them to have participated more. But I think some of that reluctance to participate was because they just hadn't done the preparation. So how could they participate? It's very hard to critique a theory when you don't know what the theory is. So some of them then were listening to what all the students were saying and kind of working out what it was about just from the discussion. But I really had to stress, the need to prepare. So I used Canvas Analytics quite effectively just to show me who was or who wasn't engaging. And I found that very, very useful.
Yeah.
Again, for many of you, I don't know, what platforms you have or how much you can, analyze what students were doing. Okay, so I'm going to finish on the flipped classroom, and then I'm going to talk just very quickly about assessment, and then we can have some discussion. So implementing the flipped classroom. So implementing the flipped classroom, again, this is from the Harvard University Box Center for Teaching and Learning. Just 3 steps they suggest. And again, I'll pass these slides on. And I think you were recording here anyway. Decide how you will use your class time and design those activities. So, like I said, is it going to be lecture recordings from me? There are people out there in the world who give far better lectures than I do on particular topics in my domain. So why not use some of their lectures? A lot of them are free to use online. There's no copyright or intellectual property around them. So you can tell your students, for next week's lecture, I'm going to do 1 hour, and then there's going to be 4 other 15-minute lectures I want you to look at from Harvard and Stanford and IIT Mumbai or whatever it might be. And the idea there is that they're getting a lecture from, some of the experts in the world. So now your lecture is actually being delivered, if you like, by some of the top professionals in the world. And then that allows you to have a wider experience for the students, but also then to bring that wider experience into the class the following week for the discussion. And you will learn a lot from that as well, because when your students are out there getting, knowledge and theory from a wider source, and then they're coming back into the classroom to discuss that, you will actually learn from that as well. Again, once you accept that you're part of that facilitation of discussion, that you're not the master who has to know everything. You're actually open as well to learning new things. For me, it just makes teaching so much more exciting. So you need to find or create those resources for students to use at home. And that takes a bit of work. You have to decide, where will they access this? How will they access it? Will you do it through your learning platform? So will you put all the links up, say in my case, on Canvas or whatever, Blackboard or Moodle or whatever you're using? Or do the students have to find it themselves? But again, my advice would be make it as simple as possible to access, because otherwise students will say they couldn't find the link or they didn't have the software or whatever it is. So I try to do everything through the Canvas page. So it's a one-stop shop. They go into the Canvas page, they can access all the links, all the lectures, the recordings, and there's no excuse then to say, they couldn't find material. And you need to teach students this concept and this process, and why it's different than just coming to a traditional lecture, and why they don't have all those social cues and other cues that they might get in a lecture because it's online. Now, again, having spoken to students, some of them tell me they find it so beneficial, because it's back to that point about learning at their own pace. They tell me it's great. You can stop a lecture, you can go back over a point. If you want to make notes about something, if you're in a classroom, the lecturer has raced on and you've missed it, and then you're trying to look at the person next to you to see did they get the notes. So a lot of students tell me they really like having the recording of a lecture, but then they also love the live session as well. So the flipped classroom tries. I think we're being joined by somebody here. Okay. So I'm just going to use the rest of my time now just to talk about online assessment, because it's one of the themes in your conference program, and it's so important, I think, going forward. And again, the role of technology in assessment. So I think there are many advantages. I probably don't need to go through them all, but I mean, obviously, for someone like myself who teaches classes with 250, 300 students, like I said, during lockdown, during the first COVID, I had 700 students online. All of them had to be examined. Many of them had project work, group project work. And it was quite a stressful time for me because I had to do all of this online from, my home office. But it was a great way to learn. There's nothing like learning when you're thrown in at the deep end. So, and that's why I'm so passionate now about using technology, because I invested so much, I suppose, of my time in trying to get up to speed in it, and I saw the benefits. So I think you're aware again of all the many benefits using technology, like getting away from the time wasting, even just the use of paper for assessment. I used to do, in-class multiple choice exams, for 350 students, even just the logistics of that alone, printing all the papers, scanning all the papers, then shredding all the question papers afterwards, really costly, wasteful. And then, there are issues with the scanner getting jammed and the photocopier getting jammed when you're printing them. And then you have to upload all the grades into, whatever's return system you're using for marks, and then there's always the potential for error. Like every time there's a step involved, there's always room for human error. Now with Canvas, the MCQ exam, it's on their laptop. They input the results. Canvas does the calculation. It upgrades, it uploads the grades. So within a second after the exam, I have all the grades. I have the grade distribution. I have the breakdown per question. I can go into each question and see, if 95% of students failed a question, I can see maybe the question wasn't worded fairly, maybe it was ambiguous. I can take that question out of the analysis so that students aren't penalized, and so on and so on. I mean, there's just so many benefits. A big discussion we're having in our university is, yes, we want to go for using technology, but the question is, should it be still on exam, on campus, invigilated, or off campus? In other words, not invigilated. So what I mean by that is, so what I did this year was the students came in to the exam hall with their laptop. They did their exam online through Canvas, but there were invigilators going around. So there were instructors walking around to make sure nobody cheated because they had their laptops with them. Now, I've been involved in a pilot study where we're using software to prevent cheating. The one we're looking at is called Respondus. And what happens with this is the minute they open their Canvas exam, there's a lockdown browser. So all they can see on their laptop is the Canvas exam. They can't even see the clock on their laptop. They can't access any files in their laptop, and they can't go online. So that's one of the ways you can get around cheating, because obviously that's a concern when you mention it. My own experience, believe it or not, was that during COVID, when we didn't have that software available and students were doing the exams at home, I actually didn't see a huge difference in grades. And that, I believe, was coming down to designing exams appropriately. So, and what I mean by that is, if you structure an exam, say, and I'm talking here, say, about multiple choice, if you structure an exam in such a way that they only have a certain amount of time to answer each question, they couldn't go into Google. So the answer would not be available on Google. So it's not just saying which one of the following represents, Weddell's theory on market segmentation, and you have A, B, C, D. You design it in such a way they couldn't do that. So you might give them a small scenario saying, which of the following marketing theories does this most closely represent? And you give them a real life scenario. So they can't just go into Google and get an answer. They can't just look at their notes and get an answer. So I realize that if you design an exam in such a way that the students can't actually get the data, or the other way you go is you go open book and you say, I know you're going to access material, and that's fine. It's an open book exam. So then in the exam, what you're testing, again, is that higher order learning, critical thinking. So yes, you have the reading in front of you, you have the notes, but what do you think? Do you think this theory does or does not address this particular phenomenon? Does it address it appropriately or not? Why not? So then you're getting more into critical thinking. So I don't get that worried about this idea of cheating, depending on how you've structured the exam. So just very quickly there, I actually did a comparison for this group in UCC that were concerned about going online with examining. And I picked the same module, but 1 year, the module, this was a midterm exam done on, a multiple choice exam. 1 year, the exam was done on, so in October 2021, the exam was done online. This was during COVID, and the students did this at home, basically. They weren't allowed on campus, so they did this on their laptop. Now, they were only given a limited time. They could only log on at a certain time. The exam closed after a certain time. So they knew they were under time pressure. I had given them guidance. We had done a test run, so they knew how to use the technology. And then last year, when they came back, the guidance in the university is we should go back to more traditional exams. So this was a paper-based exam, a very similar exam to the one they did online, but it was in paper, it was invigilated, they were in an exam hall, there were invigilators walking around, watching everyone. And what I found fascinating was when I did the analysis, the highest grade in the year they did it at home was 96, and the highest grade they did it when they did it in class, on paper with invigilators, was 96. The lowest grade was 24 when they did it at home. The lowest grade when they did it in class was 24 the following year. The average was 62.2 when they did it at home online without invigilation. And the average was 62.7 when they did it in class with invigilation. And the median was the same, which when you think about it, now the only difference was there were more students doing it online, because when it was online, more students were able to do it as an elective. But when it was back in class, because of the timetable, there were fewer elective students. But that doesn't really matter. What really matters is that the results were almost identical. I couldn't believe it. I treble checked it because I really couldn't believe that they were so close. So my argument here is that if you actually structure an exam in such a way, you can make it almost cheat proof, even if students have access to the internet, depending on how you structure the questions. And with Canvas, we can do it so it's randomized questions, randomized answers. So even if a student is sitting next to their friend in their living room doing the same exam, they're not getting the questions in the same order. Even if they get the question in the same order, they get the answers in different order. So your answer B to question 1 is completely different to mine, even though we both get the right answer. So the system works out how to randomize it and ensure the correct answer gets a mark. So even students working together can't actually collaborate, really, and particularly when there's time pressure in each question. If they're only given so much time for each question, they don't have time then to confer. So I'm very confident of that. So the last thing, I've put up a protocol there. I won't have time to go through that, but I can send it on to you. I pretty much covered what I said there in terms of setting up the exams. The last thing I just wanted to discuss, because some people were interested in this when I talked about it last week, was using student self-directed active learning and assessment. And I'd mentioned something called Belbin and the Belbin framework. And some people asked me if I would touch on that today. So I'll just do that very, very quickly because I'm conscious we're nearly out of time. So in one of my modules, it was one of my market research modules, there was a group project, 4 to 5 students in each group, randomly assigned, again, through Canvas. So the teams were set up online. They had to maintain a project group diary, which was like meeting minutes. And again, that was done online. So I could just go into Canvas. I could see that every group had submitted their weekly meeting minutes. I didn't open them unless there was a dispute. So there was no mark going for it. So there was no work involved. Everything I'm doing is with the view to reducing my workload in terms of administration. So I can focus more on my teaching, less on my administration. So that's why I'm so enthusiastic about what technology can allow us to do. They then had to undertake the Belbin team working role, and I'll finish up by explaining that in just 2 more slides. And they did this again through Canvas. So this was all done online. And I'll show you what the Belbin analysis was in the next slide. So they did the Belbin team working role of self-assessment, and then they had to maintain an individual learning log based on their Belbin assessment. And again, this was done online. So everything here, I'm talking about a class with 250 students. All of this was done online. I didn't see a single piece of paper. And it meant that as the instructor, I could just look at my Canvas screen. I could go into all the different criteria. I could see the list of all the students in front of me. I could see who had submitted, who hadn't submitted. And it was so easy to manage. And a lot of this wasn't even graded. There were no marks going for it. So they just had to submit it. And I could see if they had submitted or not. And it meant there was no grading involved. The individual learning log was just a pass or fail grade. So that was very quick to grade. So I'm just going to finish now on Belbin. So because some of you asked me, this was available online to me, but I can send on the Belbin assessment to Dr. Rani if people wish, and she can circulate it. But I mean, this is freely available. So with Belbin, what happens is the Belbin framework is for group work, and it helps students to identify what kind of personality they are when they work in a group. So they're given a series of scenarios, and then they have to allocate a certain number of points amongst what their likely response would be. So I'll just go through one. Let's say number 2 there. There's about 10 questions. I'm just going to go pick one of them at random. So if I have a possible shortcoming in teamwork, it could be that I'm not at ease unless meetings are well structured and controlled and generally well conducted. I'm inclined to be too generous towards others who have a valid viewpoint that has not been given a proper airing. I have a tendency to talk too much once the group gets onto new ideas. My objective is so on, so on, so on. I find it difficult to lead from the front. I get too caught up in ideas. So there's a mixture of positive and negative behavioral traits. And rather than just picking one of them, the students are given an imaginary 10 points, and they have to allocate those 10 points for each question and each series of answers. So if they think I talk too much, that's my real weakness, they might give that 7 out of 10. And then they might give 1 to this and 1 to this and 1 to this. Or they might give 2 to this and 2 to this. It depending, again, what we call it in market research, it's what we call constant sum. So in other words, you have an amount of points to allocate over a possible number of answers. They do that. They then, I don't have the copy of it here, but there's then a form that allows them to input their answers, the number of points they scored for each question. And then that tells them what their typical team working role is. So then there are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 9 different possible roles you could tend to have. Now, sometimes you might have a mixture. You might be 80% coordinator, 20% shaper, and so on. But the biggest advantage here is it then tells you sort of what are the positives and the negatives, if you like, of these typical kind of personality types when you work in a team. So if you're a shaper, you're challenging, you're dynamic, you thrive in pressure, you have drive, and you try to overcome obstacles. The downside of that is sometimes you can be prone to provocation by other people, maybe who you see that are impeding you. And sometimes maybe you can offend people because you're somebody who's really driven and you just try to get things done. And maybe you don't have time to be worrying about people's feelings and things like that. So the benefit of this is that when students get this, they look at it and their first learning log, they have to say, do they agree first with the assessment? So if they do that assessment I told you, that test, and it tells them that they're a team worker or they're a shaper or they're a coordinator, do they agree with it or not? So they have to reflect on that, think about maybe other group work they've done, maybe where they work or other group projects in their program. And do they agree or not with that? And then if they agree with it, why do they agree? If they don't agree, and I tell them, this is just a personality test. You can disagree. There's no problem with that, but you have to tell me why you disagree. That's what you're graded on. But what students tell me is very useful is it tells them things that they discover are true, but they never thought about it. So when they look at the weaknesses particularly, they think, oh yeah, that's something I need to know to be careful about working in this group. I do have a tendency to offend people, but I never really thought about it like that. Gosh, I could really work in that. So the idea of this for their group work in the module is that they try to understand their behavior, they try to understand their strengths and build on those. And then they also try and understand their weaknesses and develop those for the future. But the great thing about this is all done by the students. I don't have to do any of this. I just give them the framework, it's done online, and I just check the learning log just to make sure that they're submitting it. And I give it just a pass or fail grade then. And they nearly all pass it because they just apply the framework that they've been asked to do. So there's very little work on my part, but students tell me that there's great learning on their part. And again, it really helps develop those kind of soft skills I'll be talking about, those intra and interpersonal skills, again, that are so valued by employers. So they come out of this feeling very prepared for employment because they've worked on a real life project. So they have to pick a real life brand for their market research project and then conduct real life market research. So design a survey, go out and interview, customers and things like that. But for many students, they tell me they don't just learn about market research, they learn a lot about themselves and about how they work in a group as well. So that's I think one of the big benefits. The other major benefit of this, and I'm finishing on this now, the other major benefit of this is that they learn about other personality types. So many undergraduate students, they're 18, they're 19, they're 20, they don't realize that other people genuinely see the world differently from them. That's something that comes more with age and wisdom. So this makes them realize that that other person in the group who comes across as very arrogant or aggressive, they just want to do a good project. They're really rooting for the team. They're not being selfish. They just want to make sure the project gets done. And they're one of those people who just doesn't think too much about other people's feelings. Whereas then there's those people who don't say much. And some students say to me, I used to think before those students who don't say much, they're just lazy. No, they're not lazy. They're just people who don't feel comfortable speaking out when there's very strong personalities. But they will do the work in the background if they're assigned the work. So the students tell me it gives them a great understanding of other personality types when working in a team. Okay, I'm just conscious of time. I know I haven't left much time for questions. We have 5 minutes anyway, I think. So I think there's about 170 people online, which is fantastic. Delighted that there were so many people there. I believe there's a recording of this anyway. So I know I probably went quite fast for many of you, but I just want to get through all the material. But you have the presentation. I'll send it on to Dr. Rani so she can circulate it. And I understand you have the recording anyway, if you want to go back over it. And again, I think this reinforces everything I've been saying about using technology. The very fact that you can take this recording, if there was something you wanted to go back over that you think you might like to explore further, if I spoke a little too fast for you, it means you can do this again at your own time. So I think in a sense, hopefully I've kind of proven my case to you. So I'll leave it there, Dr. Rani, if you want to maybe invite any questions or.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor. Participants, any questions, please, would you like to ask? So there is one question in chat box.
Okay.
How these ICT tools will support to improve sustainable education?
So where's the question again?
How these ICT tools will support to improve sustainable education?
Well, if you mean sustainable in the sense of, sustainable in terms of the environment, again, I think it's what we call a no-brainer. Just think about this now. In my office right now, I'm at home now, but in my office now, I have boxes of paper exams. And my university is claiming to be one of the 10 most green campuses in the world. We've won some awards, and that we're, one of the most sustainable campuses. And in my office, I have all these paper exams that I now have to get shredded for confidentiality reasons. Utter madness, as far as I'm concerned. When I was able to prove, I showed you those figures, I was able to prove that I can do this online without cheating. So to my mind, this is highly sustainable. This to me supports any sustainability agenda. We use the technology, we move away from paper basically as much as possible. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, sir.
I see another question there. Yeah, I see a question there online, just how to organize material and content by using flipped classroom. Again, like I said, there's quite a bit of preparation involved, in terms of organizing the material. So you have to decide which material can I deliver online, remotely, and which material do I think I need to deliver in class? So that's, I can't tell you that. I don't know your discipline. I don't know your module. That's something every one of you will have to reflect for yourself. So what are the things you do in class normally that you think is just repetitive every year? A student could just watch this online just as effectively. And then what would be really good to do in class? Like what would be a really good discussion to have? What would be a really good theory to apply to a case study? What would be a really good problem to solve in class with all the students watching? Whereas what's something that can just be done passively online? I can't answer that question for you. You have to think about those things for yourself, for your own module. Thanks for all the nice feedback there. I think somebody else had a question there, did they?
Hello, sir. Professor.
Yes.
Professor Morfik, sir.
Yes.
For the engineering students, and physics and mathematics are the basic subject to gain more knowledge in the field of engineering technology.
Sure.
So this flipped classroom method, whether they support for the engineering students to develop physics and mathematics, which are the basic knowledge to develop engineering and physics, sir?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this because I'm aware that this was organized by physics department, and I'm in the humanities and social sciences. So, but having said that, it's quite interesting. If you look at the research I gave you, they're actually saying it's in STEM subjects, including engineering and sciences, where there are many benefits. So I don't know much about physics. I studied it for school. That's all. But I would imagine if it was something like physics, rather than just giving information about different theories in your lecture, if you were to do that online and then in class identify a situation, a problem, and ask the students, how would you apply the theory to resolve that particular problem? Now, as I said, I don't know much about your discipline, so I don't know how that could be done. But say in my own case, I give the theory, say I just to keep the examples the same, I talked about market segmentation. So in business, that's how a company divides the market into different kinds of user groups. So, male or female or high-tech savvy consumers or low-tech consumers and so on. So I can just do a lecture on that, which I used to normally do. But now I do the lecture online. So the students get that. And then we come into class and I take a real company. I take a company and I say, okay, this is a company selling washing detergent for laundry. How do you think they should segment their market? Think about the theory that I gave you online. And then I break them into smaller groups in the lecture room. And I say, okay, each group has 20 minutes to devise a segmentation strategy. Then each group has to nominate a spokesperson. And then I have a flip board at the top of the class, and they throw out their answers to me. And they say, well, we think there's a segment here that's a kind of lower income, large family, high usage, whatever. And I put that up. And then I asked, do all the students agree with that? So then we devise a segmentation strategy for that company. Now, again, physics, mathematics, it's not my discipline, but I would imagine there are ways you could have cases that you ask students to resolve by applying the theory. I don't know, maybe or not. Even if you can't do that, you could still use the flipped classroom. Like I said, it doesn't have to be fully flipped. It can just be partially flipped. So you might still have every 3 lectures might still be the normal lecture, but then for the 4th lecture, you might get the students to actually access lecture material internationally from top universities like Harvard, from other lecturers that are freely available. And then the following week, you could ask them, what they got from those lectures. So I think there's different ways of doing it, but I don't know if that answers your question, because I don't know your discipline.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you for your invaluable time. Thank you for joining second day. The second time, that is very, we are very happy about it. We appreciate your time spent with us and share your insight and experience regarding these flip side classrooms. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. And thanks everyone again for your participation.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're all again. Bye-bye. Thank you.
So very good evening, sir.
Bye-bye.
So very good evening, sir. Deependra, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Very good evening. Very good evening, sir.
Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening.
Yeah. 1 second.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. You are audible, sir. So 1 second, sir. So warm greetings and very good evening to one and all present here. Greetings from SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Ramapuram campus, Chennai, India. The Department of Physics organizing a 16-day international virtual faculty development program on teaching, learning, and assessing in 2030, which will help the teachers to improve their teaching competencies and improve their educational leadership. Esteemed guests, dedicated and supportive participants from all over the world, It is our great honor and privilege to welcome you all to this validity of a 16-day International Virtual Faculty Development Program on Teaching, Learning and Assessing in 2030. We are very much delighted to welcome our chief guest of this evening, Dr. Deependra Kumar Shah, Chief Academic Officer, L&T EduTech, Chennai, India. Welcome you, sir. It gives immense pleasure in welcoming all the participants from all over the world for valedictory ceremony of this FDP program. Thank you. Dr. Deependra Kumar Shah is a Chief Academic Officer of L&T EduTech, a well-versed administrator with over 23 years of experience in research, teaching, industry, and administration. Dr. Shah has served as the Vice Chancellor of 4 universities. We are very honored to have you, sir. University of Petroleum Energy Studies, Dehradun, GD Goenka University, Gurgaon, KR Mangalam University, Gurgaon, and Adams University, Kolkata. Dr. Shah has a Doctor of Engineering degree in Artificial Complex Systems Engineering from Hiroshima University, Japan. He has worked on a wide-ranging activities in multiple electric utility companies and academic institutions in India, Nepal, and Japan. A resource person on outcome-based education and accreditation. He has been a part of visiting teams of National Board of Accreditation as a member and as a chairperson. He was conferred Most Elite Academician Award 2022 by IEEE GlobeCon PT and Most Impactful Vice Chancellor Award 2020 by Daily Indian Media and Power Brands. He also received Excellent Researcher Award for 2 consecutive years, 2008 and 2009, at Hiroshima University, Japan, for his outstanding academic achievements. His research interests include power system planning and operation, renewable energy technology, power system reliability, and smart grid, to name a few. He holds several patents in these fields. His work has been published in several reputed international journals and conference proceedings. With this introduction, we welcome our chief guest to deliver his address. Sir, please.
Thank you, Professor Asokan, and thank you for inviting me. It's indeed a pleasure and privilege to be here. It's been a while that I was following your messages, and it's 16 days long. I mean, this is must be one of the longest FDP that I have witnessed actually in recent past. Normally, it's 5 days or sometime a week or so, but 16 days. So hats off. And the galaxy of speakers that you were able to get, I think that's commendable. More than 500 participants from 14 countries and some really big names. So I was fascinated, and particularly the topic that you have chosen. Like teaching. We all know that things are changing. We all have witnessed, though worldwide things had changed, a while back, even before COVID. But India had to actually wait for a COVID to actually, make things happen, or probably to realize us as educators and even other stakeholders that things can go even online. Otherwise, you could not have imagined probably a 16 days program like this in completely online mode. So we know that things are changing. In fact, everything around us were changing. But then, as a teachers, we always thought that whether teaching learning will change or not. Since beginning, probably the first industrial revolution, which happened in 18th century, and till today, you would see that some of the things are almost same. Very little things have moved. But past few years have seen phenomenal changes, and with this, in this era of this artificial intelligence and clubbed with some other things, now looks like really we have hit this accelerator now. Things are bound to change, and changing at a pace that probably it's never been seen before, unprecedented. But then at the onset, I would like to first thank you and great work to Professor Asokan and the team. Also, congratulate all the participants, speakers who have who delivered their sessions and enlightened the participants with their invaluable thoughts. I would like to make a small brief presentation that what things have changed in recent past, and whether some of the things are relevant when it comes to teaching, learning, and assessment, and how we anticipate. One can only say that some of the things will change, but eventually what will change and what the shape will be, it's very difficult to predict at this moment. And anything you say at this moment, probably there will not be any right or wrong here. Nobody can probably say that with conviction that this is what is going to happen, and therefore all the more reasons to deliberate on these things very keenly and probably see the trends and where we are heading. I'm also mindful of the fact that a lot of things that will change, the kind of skill set that will change. I mean, we are preparing the graduates with certain skill sets. They are going to change maybe in a less than a decade. You said it 2030, it can be a little beyond that, but then some of the things will change. The workforce will require some of the skill sets which are not known yet even. So in this context, it's very difficult to actually reimagine, the role of teachers, how the teaching will happen. Well, content is everywhere, but then the role of a teacher is going to be redefined. Already the process has begun, and how we, see the teachers, whether the university in this current form will exist, or say there will be a relevance, and what kind of assessment we are talking about. I think I have tried to put down, put up, some of the, things, my thoughts in the form of a small presentation. So, I might have, the permission to share.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can do it, sir. Yes, sir. You can do it, sir.
Just give me a few sec. I'm just. Hope
Yes,
it
sir.
is feasible.
Yes, sir. Visible, sir.
Okay, great. Well, so I will just, I would like to take you, maybe as I begun my, statement by saying that it was in 18th century when, things started. And, the formal education came into, existence probably in the similar time, first industrial revolution. But the early schools, if you see early schools or universities, were less about improving, children mindset. The requirement, the purpose was different. The purpose was to support that industrial revolution. So it was mostly like, about producing a punctual, obedient workforce for the new factories. It was, the schools and university themselves were like, factories, because they were like, into the business of training, sorting, and, for the different discipline and disciplining them for the future. They themselves were kind of, factories. If you see some early images of a factory and a schoolroom, you will not see many difference. The children in rows, like, you see the picture in left, that's of an industry, and then of a school, and university is no different. So what was common was, they all were facing front, and there was someone delivering something. So maybe in the case of in an industry, it was a supervisor, giving them instructions. In case of university and schools, there was a teacher imparting his or her wisdom. But one thing was very common, that the children or the people working, they all looked unhappy. We'll come to, those points, that why they, looked unhappy. In many respects now, that, things have changed very little. This is a modern classroom, you see, and there is again, people facing front, and most of our universities are like that. The classroom setup is like that, which started in, first industrial revolution, almost more than 2 centuries back. In today's classroom, the lecture theaters and the students are still expected to sit in rows, listening to the teacher. Now, this I call it industrial classrooms. Maybe the purpose had changed. The purpose in the early, industrial revolution was, making them, disciplined, making them like, punctual, regular, listening to, obedient person, listening to the instructions of a supervisor. Now, this is almost similar even till today. I mean, maybe things are changing at this moment, but then we are going through transition, I would say. So now, all the more reason, because the purpose has changed, we need to redefine or reshape the 21st century classrooms first. And then only comes, so the first infrastructure, and then comes the content, pedagogy, and assessment. But first is whether the place where we are imparting education, whether this is fit for imparting education of 21st century. So education needs to equip today's young people with the skill sets which will be required in the future so that they can thrive. But as I said already, that some of the skill sets are not known yet, and therefore, what are those skill sets that we need to impart so that the graduates will continue to be relevant in the workforce of the future. Why we need to do so? You see, I mean, the role of computers, which was not earlier, say, influential. The computers can not only, be programmed to fulfill some of the human needs, human tasks, but they themselves are learning. They themselves are learning, and what we call now, artificial intelligence and machine learning. So machines have started learning. Of course, humans are behind them, applying their processing power to massive data sets. So data sets, massive data sets available, and they are learning and they are getting better day by day. Okay. So, with the advancement in the technologies like nanotechnology, robotics, 3D printing, and artificial intelligence and machine learning is going to transform most of the occupations. I mean, whatever occupation we have, many of the occupations are going to change. And in fact, by 2030, a sizable percentage of this, maybe 8 to 10%, 8 to 14%, as per the researchers say, that will be automated, like they will replace some of the occupations that we have today. And by 2055, half of the work activities which is being done by human today will be completely automated. That's where we are in. According to the World Economic Forum's future job survey, a wide range of occupations will require a higher degree of cognitive abilities, such as creativity, logical reasoning, problem sensitivity, as a part of their core skill sets. Because it's not only about contemporary skill set that they need to learn. It's about cognitive abilities like creativity, communication, design thinking. Those things are going to be the key. So it's very different world for which our schools and university were designed to serve the early, first industrial revolution that I talked about. Now, how are we going to prepare a student or teach a student who has everything at their fingertips in all the information? It's a Google generation, or say even Chat GPT nowadays. A newer thing has come, like AI based engine. So with a world of readily searchable knowledge at our fingertips, we don't need to memorize things. But if you see, a lot of things were actually, the way we assess even, many of our questions are actually not high order thinking, hard questions. Many of them are either memorizing or a bit of understanding, and very few on the, above the higher pyramid of the Bloom's level. Many things that we traditionally learned at school, I learned, Professor Asokan, and many of you would have learned, you might feel that, it's little pointless in digital age. For example, handwriting, you always wonder that, who cares for a great handwriting? The rules of spelling and grammar, foreign languages even, to some extent it is okay, but then you will feel that, everything is at your, the gadgets have come and everything, so that you don't probably, they might, sound or feel a little pointless. But we will need to we'll need new skills like how to interpret search results. I think that is what is more important. Critically assess the quality of a data, accuracy of the data available to us, or say information available with us, and making decisions, of course, ethical decisions about how to use those data. I think that's more important. So what we need to see, we need to prepare our children with an ability to how can they creatively come up with solutions of the complex problem of the world, right? If you see how the education, I mean traditional education versus modern education, how it has changed. So in future, work will be structured around projects. Today, and that's the same thing it's going to be in case of the trend in case of education too. What earlier it used to be like, even now, I mean, we have, for example, physics, chemistry, and everything being taught in silos. That's not going to be the case, going forward. The way things are evolving, because it will be project based, it will be problem based, which seeks to engage a student, natural curiosity rather than simply presenting them with information. As I said, information is everywhere. If you see, just take a few moments to actually see this traditional versus modern education, definition or say attributes, you will realize that how things have moved on. With a teacher-led thing to a student-centric, with a teacher used to be giving instructional delivery. Now it's a 24/7, 365 personalized learning. It was one fit for all. Now it is like personalized learning. Limited as per the availability of resources, not only human resource but even other resources like books, etc., which used to be only in library. Now we have technology which can actually facilitate the entire like infinite resource of learning with us. Mostly it was one sided. Now it's like interaction based, more rigid, structured and time bound, to now progressive, less structure, and something competency based. Mostly earlier theoretical to the more. So modern system has already changed from a passive learning to active and interaction based learning, and rote learning to now focus on the knowledge and use of, I mean, using methods like a method of inquiry. So I think already modern education has actually adopted a lot of these things. I'm sure many of you would have heard about this thing that phenomenon-based learning. Already a couple of countries have started implementing this. And if you see the steps of phenomenon-based learning, it like first you establish goal as a phenomenon instead of splitting into learning different subjects like physics, chemistry, etc. It is taught in a more holistic and real world way. Now, real world doesn't have a physics and chemistry thing there. It's like holistic always. So holistic will be like you will talk about a phenomena, you talk about a goal, you talk about a problem, then engage and immerse student learners with that problem, and it will be interdisciplinary for sure. Then comes personalized learning, because the requirement of different students, different learners will be different. Then establish evidence-based inquiry to knowledge. Then finally, questioning for reflection, and then documenting as a portfolio. So this is what is phenomenon-based learning, and this is already implemented in some part of the world, mostly from European country it has started. So skills such as communication, creativity, and critical thinking is actually will be considered better over the other skills that probably they will, because the contemporary skills will not be so relevant because they will keep changing for a 21st century workplace. As I said, all cohorts are will be interdisciplinary in nature. So next, and also I think my earlier speaker were talking about flipped classroom. So I think next generation learning, it has already started though, will be spaces will be flipped. Now, how much is something that we need to see, and depend. It will depend on time and what they are learning, etc. As I said, it will, the approach of learning and teaching learning will be a problem-solving approach. So which will include like, identifying a problem, then explore, the information, creative ideas, select the best idea out of, those ideas that the students will have, and build and test the ideas, and finally evaluate the results. So the problem solving approach is what is going to be the key. So the teacher will become a facilitator. He will no longer be a source of information. Rather, he will become a source of inspiration. So, as I said, the teacher as a facilitator doesn't need to stand at the front of a class to impart their wisdom. And so the student, they don't necessarily need to just listen and be in the rows facing the front, which started and with the first industrial revolution, and which continues to be the case even today. Right. So in the education of system of the future, homework will happen before the lesson. So teacher can record some structured content, for a student to absorb at their own pace when they come into classroom, and then the teacher can actually help them, solve the problem. Blended learning is going to be the key. Blending can happen in different ways. It's not only about online versus offline blending. Earlier also blending used to happen. I mean, we used to have a classroom plus, some augmented learning through, library, through industry visits, etc. But now online also there are two ways now. One is asynchronous, the other is synchronous. So synchronous learning, one will be face-to-face, teaching, which is currently happening. But then more important will be, online, electronic medium, but then synchronous. And then, of course, asynchronous learning, where different courses curated by, different, the likes of Coursera, NPTEL, L&T EduTech, does it as well. So those things will come, and we will be able to blend our curricula, blend our learning with them. Power of social media is going to be critical. Already we have observed that social media is going to be a big thing, and influence it will have, and it will have influence in teaching learning as well. Now the university of the future will need a wider variety of places for learning. So what used to happen was, earlier probably one teacher in non-Google era, I would say, or say non-chat GPT. Chat GPT came just recently, but those days, one teacher and then a large cohort of a student, and facing all front, teacher giving their wisdom, it was okay. But now it's different. As I said, personalized learning, smaller, because we need to now engage people, not impart information. So the purpose itself has changed. So university will need much wider variety of places for learning. So maybe the infrastructure that has been developed over the years, that will have to go a big transformation. And there, like many of the, almost all the countries, you will see only a few handful of universities are there which are, built with this thing in mind. So from spaces where large group can work together, to secluded corners for concentration, and everything in between. The large, spaces to a small spaces, and in between. So all sort of infrastructure augmentation, infrastructure transformation will take place. Innovation, communication, and collaboration will be the core skills. So unlike many of the things that today we are talking, I think these are the skills of the future. Innovation, communication, and collaboration is a must, and that too with an interdisciplinary cohort. So routine tasks will, continue to be taken over by computers, as the robots and all these humanoid robots and other AI based things are taking gaining momentum, becoming more matured. I think the routine task will be taken over by the computers, wherein the individual will be valued for creativity and intuition that only human mind can offer. And mind you, human mind till that day, because human mind also, I mean, will continue to have many things, being taken away by the AI based thing as they mature, as the system matures. So there will be, like, this also will be put on test. Now, the most important part is the silos for faculties and departments will not exist in the future. As I said, Department of Physics and Department of Chemistry working in silos will not exist, will not happen. Instead, the system will talk about the need to glue people together in different ways. We discovered, why and how should we compartmentalize, these education. But now the point will be, how can we connect the dots? How can we glue people together? How can we become interdisciplinary? That's what the need of the hour will be. Now, ideas can happen in corridors. So there will be, at one end, we'll have specialized laboratories. At the other end, social spaces where the researchers from different discipline, from social sciences, liberal arts, and science, technology, all can sit and talk about meaning of life, because that will be more important. So as we say, it will be holistic learning, problem-based learning, talking about certain projects, certain phenomena, rather than talking about subjects like physics, chemistry, or electrical or computer. So the buildings with full of enclosed spaces will be a matter of past in the new the kind of this thing that we are talking, new kind of education industry that we are talking, universities that we are talking. Smaller places will be more to engage learners, and that's what going to be the key. And you can see the technology at the heart of learning space of the future. Already technology has penetrated. Today we are talking, it's because of technology it has become possible. But it will not only be this. If you see, the learning will be the dynamic learning environment to support real time student to student, teacher to student, and student to teacher interaction. So it's like peer learning and two-way interaction between a facilitator, which is teacher, and the student will happen. The next frontier is totally immersive learning. So while 3D models and visualization already has come in to picture, we know AR, VR technology, but at a scale it has not taken over. At classroom, it has not penetrated so far. You would have heard that there is a robot teacher in Bangalore, one of the schools in Bangalore. It has started teaching physics, chemistry, and math. Now this is where we are actually moving. So it's not only the robots or the teachers like this, but the immersive experience, 3D, AR, VR technology at mass scale. So that's going to be there, and ideas can come anywhere, everywhere, and that's why the learning space will have to be redesigned. So if I may tell you that what will make it possible. This is going to be possible through industry academia linkage. The possibilities are endless. When the whole world was grappling with COVID in 2020, we have seen AstraZeneca. It was possible with University of Oxford. It was a joint collaboration, and that resulted into a vaccine which actually helped saving the world. I mean, this contributed in saving the world at that point. This is only just one example. It has to be a real, links. Industry probably giving one problem, and then students working on that is what. And there can be number of possibilities. Possibilities are endless. So what is going to be important is connectedness. We need to be connected, because why I said industry, because industry will be working on the real life problems. And this has to go to classroom experience. Then collaboration is the key. Collaboration, when I say, it has to be interdisciplinary collaboration, and then co-creating something together. Anytime, anywhere learning. This is going to be the key. Already we have seen that with the introduction of things like this digital learning from different sources. Already it has started happening, but this is going. It was not only for COVID, by the way. This is going to be an indelible and integral part of our learning process. There will be a customization for learner first approach. So it will not be one fit for all. Okay. Now, considering the shift towards a more personalized learning experience, the teacher of the future must be, it's not like today what they are. They should be data collectors, analysts, planners, collaborators, curriculum experts, synthesizers, problem solvers, and researchers. So the role of teachers is going to change. If we actually analyze that, will the universities be necessary in future? Well, I will say yes and no both. The universities will not be probably relevant if we continue to be the university of today. It may not happen probably in 30, but then eventually I'm talking that university will become redundant if we continue to be the university of today, what we are today. The way we are, imparting education, giving a degree. You know that many institutions, for example, Google, 20% of the workforce don't have a degree. 20% of the workforce working in Google, they don't have a degree. So not necessarily if we give just degree, it's a skill set which is more important, attitude which is more important, the critical thinking ability, design thinking approach. I think these are going to be more important. Creativity is going to be more important than just giving a piece of paper, which is a degree. So that is going to change. But yes, this will continue to be there. University will continue to exist. However, it will change not only in dimensions, not only in infrastructural way, but also the teaching learning. So significant part of the workforce will need to switch to occupational categories. So today we are, in one, category we are working at something. Tomorrow that work or the job may cease to exist, or maybe it will be automated. Maybe it will be taken by, the robots. Then in that case, we need to learn and switch our occupational categories. Who is going to equip us? So the workforce will need to continue to adapt, in the new occupation, new capability that we need to, evolve alongside increasingly capable machines. Machines are also learning. Machines are also, becoming conversant, becoming proficient, becoming able to do certain, perform certain job. So alongside machines, we are also going to evolve and switch, quickly to different occupation. People will be required to top up the skills. So maybe 10 years back, something like artificial intelligence was not that important. Those who would have graduated now, in order to stay relevant in the say workforce, they need to upgrade themselves with AI based and data analytics and other skill sets. So this will continue to happen. Now we know that the average generation gap, as we say, is less than 3 years because of the advancement in computer technology. So average generation, this gap is, this effective generation gap is actually narrowing, which means if we do not, the age will continue the way it is. However, when if we do not upgrade or update ourselves, do not top up our skills, even within 3 years or less than 3 years, we will start talking as if there exists a generation gap between us. That is what is going to happen. So in this new environment, university will have to redefine their approach. Increased investment in education will be required. And at the same time, training workshop will also become a priority. Workforce will become a priority. So jobs that require only secondary education will be lost to automation. So completely there will be no job for that category. While the jobs requiring a minimum of bachelor degree, now that bachelor degree also changing skill set. We can't have today's bachelor degree will continue to be relevant even tomorrow. That will grow. But anything below that, no job will be there, because all these things, even say for example drivers and all, that drivers less cars are coming. A lot of other innovations. Even someone making a coffee. Now there are already restaurants with no human. Pizzas, coffee, all are being made by robots. So I think these all things will be lost to automation. Even the frontline soldiers, there will be robo soldiers who will not get tired, who will not get, the fatigue will not come. And this is how it is going to shape up. So people have to quickly top up their skills, knowledge, and they need to switch. They should be able to switch their occupation. And therefore, the university will be ready to cater to this category. if the teaching and learning is going to change, how do we assess the students? And this is a very the image that you see here is a very uh, famous one. I mean, let's be a very what you say. Let's be very let's be fair to everyone. And the selection process, this fellow, I mean, the person there is saying that explaining that you have to climb a tree. Now, that, every individual, every species, like, from elephant to monkey to every, is the fish and all, they all have different capabilities. But what we are doing, and this is what the education system is today, that they all want, we have a standardized system. And in fact, yesterday, I was talking to one of my colleagues here at LNT, and she narrated a story that her own son actually, talked that, how his skill sets are different. He wants to do something different in life, but why education system is assessing me with a person who is not probably, I mean, whose intents are different, who wants to be different, whose skill sets are different, but they all are put together for same test. And therefore he said that he was losing interest in this system. And this is not exceptions, I would say. A lot of people have started thinking so. Students today are heavily focused on what end result: achieving high CGPA, receiving a distinction in class, merit list. The education of the future will prove that, has been like known to us, time tested, this quote that results do not define us. Results do not define you. We know that there are college dropouts like Mark Zuckerberg, or many people who could not pass one exam, but they passed in, and then they flourished, they thrived in the exam of life. They were so successful and even role models. Grading is a waste of time if the purpose is solely to the sole point is to just define that who is at the top and who is at the bottom. So in this context, I would say, how do we assess outcomes? They are more important. It's not about assessing people, it's about assessing outcomes. Maybe what will happen is real life industry problems and project will be given to an interdisciplinary project to solve. As I said, the teaching learning pattern will be actually project based, problem based, and the problem will be given by industry. There has to be an industry academia link, and the learners will feel also a sense of responsibility that they are actually making an impact in real life. They are solving an issue which is actually important for making this society a better place. The learners will be able to analyze societal and environmental impact. Now, environmental aspects are going to be more important of their work, and inculcate a sense of empathy while they are working on this thing. Assessment will be continuous, not like a 1 hour or 3 hour, like assessing and grading them for life. That is not going to be the case. It will be in the future. It will be evidence based. It has to be evidence-based, using measures that allow learning plans to be drawn up and personalized. So outcome-based, assessment is going to be the key. Defining measurable, and this will include that defining measurable learning outcomes, providing instructions accordingly, assessing, the assess learning, like measure and collect data, then review and interpret assessment evidence, and then use these assessment results to improve, to suggest improvement. This is what is going to be the case going forward. No longer the way we do. Technology based assessment will also come into picture. However, we'll have to see that whether setting up those question papers, questions, etc., is also going to be a key challenging. So these are certain things that I wanted to share. And I know that you have had wonderful speakers talking to you on their area of expertise. They would have imparted their thoughts, their critical insights in over last 15 days. And I'm sure that many of you, though it is online, you did not get an opportunity to meet and create probably some memories together, but at least online, a few, friends for life you must have made. And I'm sure that, this was a great success. And once again, I thank you for inviting me. I hope that the future, the way it is going to be, uh, uh, you know, going to shape up this future is going to be completely different than what we are having today. Some of the things are scary, actually. I mean, some of the things are like, we think that, everything around us is changing. For example, the shopping experience changed. We used to have, different shops, then came shopping malls, and now we are no longer required or no longer going to, for shopping. Now look at the way transportation, changed, from the way we used to book taxis, etc., etc. Now everything changing, we kept on thinking that, will education change? And probably this was our fear, that we as an educator, we used to think that, education will be immune to this. This is not going to be the case. The vulnerability actually came, very, very clearly when the pandemic hit and we were forced to be confined in our homes. That had changed already. And I always say this thing at different forums when I used to speak, that it is like a genie in the bottle. Genie has come out of the bottle, in the form of this blending, online, etc., etc., and it's not going to go back into the bottle. Thank you very much for having me. You have a wonderful time.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for your invaluable time to share your insight about this future of education. You start from this, how these classrooms as well as the industry started with the Industry Revolution 1. And you talk about this current generation people of the, as a Google generation of the people. And you talk about compare the traditional versus modern education system, what are the changes we have to compare it. And how the future of university has to be right from the infrastructure, from the classroom level to how this assessment and assessment in terms of outcome has to be measured on that. It was very, and again, this classrooms, the imparting knowledge to the engaging students is important input we take it from user. So instead of imparting we all along be imparting the knowledge, now we want to how we are going to engage the students. These are the immediate impact we can able to create inside the classroom as soon as we go to the next tomorrow classrooms. Thank you for your invaluable time, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And as a gratitude is a sign of noble souls, it is indeed a matter of immense gratification and honor to propose a vote of thanks. On my own behalf, as well as the Department of Physics, I wish to render our sincere gratitude to our honorable and beloved Chairman and Managing Committee members, Dean of SRM IST Ramapuram campus for their encouragement and extensive support. We keep on our indebtedness to our distinguished Chief Guest, Dr. Deependra Kumar Shah, Chief Academic Officer, L&T EduTech, Chennai, India, for sparing his valuable time from his busy schedule in order to give his valuable address to the enthusiastic participants from all over the world. I'm very thankful to all the participants for their solid support for this 15-day, so far 16 days faculty development program. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.